which several agencies are reportedly conducting internal investigations. Others may tighten ethics rules. Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle have proposed legislation to address stock trading, both among members of Congress and officials in the federal government, and to add new ethics rules for justices on the Supreme Court as well. You know, it's a bit of a strange bedfellow situation, David, because you have Senator Josh Hawley, for example, a conservative, and Senator Elizabeth Warren, a liberal, generally on the same side of this issue. And the basic outlines of how trading could be curtailed will be either to require officials and lawmakers to divest certain stock investments or to put them in a blind trust.
All right, Marketplace's Nova Safo, thank you. We're coming off a big week of retailers reporting profits and sales for the previous quarter, and between inflation and talk of a recession maybe later this year, despite the very strong job market, planning is a dicey proposition. Macy's, for instance, says it's doubling down on store brands. Costco and Target say customers are focusing on essentials. Marketplace's Kristen Schwab has more.
The more worried people are about their finances and the economy, the less loyal they are to their usual brands and stores.
At the end of the day, consumers really look for pricing and value.
Landon Luxembourg is a retail analyst at Third Bridge. He says this puts stores like Dollar Tree and Costco in a good position. Other big box stores are shifting their sales strategies, pushing private label products and changing inventory to focus more on necessities and less on discretionary items.
They likely will not emphasize their electronics sections as much.
But Jessica Ramirez, a retail analyst at Jane Hawley and Associates, says people still want to treat themselves. The treats are just smaller.
Am I going to buy a new suit jacket or am I going to buy a lipstick?
Target says beauty is one of its strongest performers right now because while a full mani-pedi could feel like a splurge, a bottle of nail polish might be doable. I'm Kristen Schwab for Marketplace.
S&P futures are up 0.25%. NASDAQ futures are up 0.5%, just over a half an hour here before formal trading begins. Later this week, the guardian of interest rates in chief, Jerome Powell, shares his view of the economy in testimony to Congress. On Friday, it's the big labor market reports covering February. The survey of households yields the unemployment rate. A separate report draws on data from company payrolls, where forecasters expect job gains to be much lower than the blockbuster January report. Unemployment is expected to hold steady at a very low 3.4%.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Palo Alto Networks. Palo Alto Networks delivers comprehensive cybersecurity protection while automating cyber defense to stop threats so organizations can thrive. Learn more at paloaltonetworks.com.
Demand to live in smaller, outdoor-focused communities is through the roof, especially ones favored by wealthy people. With real estate prices hitting record highs, local workers are in a bind trying to afford a place to live. Today we'll focus on the West. Here's Will Walkie of the Mountain West News Bureau.
Brandon Whitesell vividly remembers visiting Jackson Hole, Wyoming for the first time in 2007. He was enamored with the national parks in the area like Yellowstone and the wildlife.
We saw, 100 elk and then pronghorn and then moose. I mean, there's no place like that in the United States, really.
Whitesell was hooked. He's a former real estate developer who was financially stable enough to retire young. In 2018, he moved to Jackson full-time. Now he snowboards, mountain bikes, and explores Wyoming with his wife and son.
So it really is this beautiful utopia. It really is. It's a bubble.
And that bubble just keeps getting more expensive. Last year, the average single-family home price topped $5 million, almost double what it was in 2019. That's pricing out locals like Ariel Kazunas, who works for a nonprofit. She says there's new construction all over her neighborhood.
A lot of homes are just getting straight up demolished to make room for bigger homes that are selling for a lot more than anyone I know can afford.
Last year, out of nearly 200 single-family homes that sold in Jackson Hole, only 2 were under $1 million. Kazunas says some friends, even doctors and lawyers, are moving away. She's thinking about it too.
It sits wrong that just because I don't have millions of dollars, I shouldn't get to live where I want to live.
And Jackson isn't alone. Lake Tahoe in California and Nevada and parts of Park City, Utah also saw prices reach records last year. In Colorado mountain towns, a recent survey showed that 31% of long-term renters say they have severe difficulties finding a place to live. Dan Dockeray is a realtor in Telluride and says the pandemic prompted wealthy people to go hunting for homes in the mountains.
People were locked down and they kind of said, what am I doing with my life and these things? And they said, part of that is I want to prioritize lifestyle.
Dockeray was expecting fewer buyers last year because of things like rising interest rates. He was wrong, and now he expects prices to keep rising.
I think we're going to see demand become stronger by summer as people realize we're either in a recession or we're not.
In the meantime, towns are looking for new ways to keep their local workforce. That includes down payment assistance programs and allowing for denser neighborhoods. The question is, will that be enough when there's still so many wealthy people who want their own personal paradise in the mountains, no matter the cost? I'm Will Walkie for Marketplace.
And you're listening to the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
Film director Colm Barrade grew up in Dublin in the 1980s. Few people spoke Irish then or now, but his Irish language film is up for an Oscar.
It is wonderful to see that there is a sort of a reappraisal taking place, a sort of willingness to give the language a chance or to give it space.
How dialogue in the movie On Colleen Kuhn, The Quiet Girl, is raising awareness of the Irish language. It's on the world.
Radio IQ is broadcasting in digital on WVTF Roanoke, WRIQ Charles City Richmond, WURV Richmond, WVTU Charlottesville, WVTW Charlottesville, WVTR Marion, WISC FM Wise, WQIQ Spotsylvania, WIQR Lexington, WEHC Emory, WLUR Lexington, and in Richmond on 92.5 and Fredericksburg on 94.9. Radio IQ, a service of Virginia Tech.
Welcome to NewsHour from the BBC World Service. I'm Razia Iqbal. We hear from two different front lines in the war in Ukraine, a town just outside Bakhmut, and also we speak to the mayor of the strategic town of Kupiansk. The Russians are pounding it in their efforts to retake it.
Kupiansk has sustained...
Good morning, everybody. The March 6, 2023 session of Roanoke City Council is hereby called to order, and I will ask our clerk, Ms. Susan McCord, to please call the roll.
Mr. Vollison?
Here.
Ms. Moon Reynolds? Here. Ms. Sanchez-Jones will be absent. Mr. Pretty?
Here.
Vice Mayor Cobb?
Here.
Ms. White Boyd? Here. Mayor Lee?
Here, and a quorum is present. And also, I'm pleased to recognize Mr. William Brent Robertson, who is the Assistant City Manager of Community Development and the Director of Finance. Good morning, Brent.
Good morning.
council meetings will be televised live and replayed on RVTV Channel 3 on Thursdays at 7 o'clock p.m. and Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and video stream through Facebook Live at facebook.com/Roanoke VA. Council meetings are offered with closed captioning for the deaf or hard of hearing. All right. Items for action today. There's a communication from the mayor's office that we requesting that council convene in a closed meeting to discuss vacancies on certain authorities, boards, commissions, and committees appointed by council pursuant to section 2.2-3711 Code of Virginia as amended. There's a list of current vacancies for council members that was included with the agenda today. Can I get a motion for the closed session?
So moved. Second.
Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Volleson?
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Aye.
Mr. Pretty?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb?
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd?
Aye.
And Mayor Lee.
Aye. And the motion passes. Thank you. All right, are there any items listed on the 2 p.m. council docket requiring discussion, clarification, or any additions or deletions to that agenda item this afternoon? Pardon me? Yes, Ms. Gore?
Good morning, ma'am. Yes, on item, I would like for staff to be prepared to report out on 71H. I did not have a chance this weekend to contact the manager, but in reviewing the report, I just had several questions, and I just wanted you all to be prepared to answer. One being, I want to know who the engineer of record is, as well as who did the pre-engineering prior to the bidding on this particular job. There were several things that were changed. You worked them out as work item A, B, C, and D, and I just had several questions with some of the overdues you're going to have to redo that's costing the city money, and as well as what was covered in the change order number 1, number 2, as well as number 3 that totaled the $1.5 million.
Yes, ma'am. We'll have someone prepared to address those questions at the 2 o'clock session.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right. So noted. All right. We're ready now to have our briefing. And I'm going to call on Mr. Robertson for the briefings that we have this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of council, this morning we have 3 briefings to bring forward to council. The first one is just a general information update from Scott Ramsberg at RVTV, and we've set aside 15 minutes for Scott to come up and give his year, I guess, to the board, or am I ahead of myself? Okay, that's good, Scott. So it's Scott. We'll have 2 after Scott.
Good morning, Mayor Lee, Vice Mayor Cobb, members of City Council. Thank you for allowing me time to update you about Roanoke Valley Television as a civic media resource for the city. I first approached your staff in January about providing an update, not only because there are new members on council, but also, just like the media landscape, RVTV has changed significantly in the past several years. Additionally, in 2023, we celebrate our 30th year serving the city of Roanoke. But before I go any further, I'd like to show you a brief 1-minute highlight reel of some of our work. As you can see, Roanoke Valley Television is involved in a wide range of services designed to support the communications needs of our government partners. You're all aware of one of the most important functions, of course, ensuring public access to government meetings like this one, of which 96 were recorded, directed, and live streams in 2022. We're involved in creative content generation, much in the form of video. Last year alone, we produced 37 hours of content from 359 unique projects. RVTV also provides still photography services, valuable drone videography for our partners, thanks to an in-house FAA-certified drone pilot, Trevor. Finally, we're involved in a variety of graphic layout, design, and even animation projects, and we conservatively estimate that RVTV produced a service value of around $2 million last year alone for our partners. Getting into some of our 30-year history, RVTV was chartered through a mutual cooperation agreement of the City of Roanoke, Roanoke County, and the town of Vinton. Our mission is to provide educational and institutional programming, and while we've historically operated as a traditional government media cable access station, our focus shifted in 2020 with my arrival to be more of a civic media resource for our partner governments and their respective school systems. Whereas our content used to consist mostly of lengthy host and participant interviews, now our finished content is geared towards mobile consumption in the form of fast-paced 3 to 5 minute media pieces. It's a change that's been widely recognized not only through awards. You see here, last month we were awarded 3 Gold Summit Awards from Public Relations Society of Blue Ridge Chapter, but also through increased use of our expanded services by our partner agencies. You see here examples of how agencies have used our graphic design services for things like logos and animations. So who we are, this slide shows off our talented staff members who you've probably interacted with at one time or another. My background includes video marketing and government communications, which enables us to help our partners come up with collaborative, creative engagement content. We have 2 multimedia producer 2s who oversee programming and engineering, and 2 multimedia producer 1s. And all of our staff members are both content creators and producers. Combined, we have about 100 years of media experience. RVTV is overseen by the Regional Cable Television Committee. This consists of an elected representative, thank you, Peter, for serving in that role, a citizen representative, and a communications staff member from each agency. We meet every other month to help guide operations. Roanoke County is our fiscal agent and handles our human resources as well as many of our IT needs. I develop the budgets annually, which consist primarily of staffing costs. The majority of our equipment and all capital expenses are currently funded through cable franchise agreements. Our operating budget is split between the 3 partner agencies by percentage of population. Note that cable fees do not directly offset operating costs, but each locality receives from the state its share of a 5% sales and use tax, which includes various communications taxes like cell phones and cable. Cable subscribers also have a 20-cent EG fee wrapped into their taxes to support PEG programming, such as what RVTV provides. Who can use RVTV? In 2021, the Regional Cable Television Committee adopted a new policy manual describing how requests are made for projects. Employees of the communications offices of our partner agencies and school systems or designated communicators from another department with approval of the communications office may make requests for use of RVTV. Staff may take advantage of an online portal to make those requests. And we also extend media production requests to affiliated government partners such as RCACP and Regional Commission, among others. Our policy manual describes how these production requests are prioritized in case of conflicts or just a busy schedule. The Cable Television Committee has operations subcommittee that can be conferred with if questions arise over eligibility or priority. A quick overview of some of our facilities and equipment. In recent years, we've used capital funding to outfit RVTV with the equipment of a modern production studio. Since 2020, we've upgraded our set at Jefferson Center with modular backdrops, LED lights, and full-wall cyclorama green screen. And if you haven't visited our studio at Jefferson Center, I'd love to give you a tour. Just a taste of some of the gear we currently operate with cinema quality Sony cameras and lenses, as well as a multi-axis gimbal camera. And all staff are proficient on multiple software tools within Adobe Creative Suite. And we're constantly looking for opportunities to improve our technology and equipment to meet the ever-changing needs of media production. For the purposes of tracking and ease of browsing content for the public, we divide our projects into 4 main categories shown here. Business, that includes recurring programming like Biz Roanoke, which has a lot of ribbon cuttings and business profiles for our economic development here. We also have frequent requests from economic development offices for use of drone footage to help with prospects. Education for the city, this mostly has consisted lately of superintendent communications and features on performing arts from the city schools. Recreation, this includes event public service announcements, features on recreation programs and services, and attraction videos in partnership with Roanoke Outside or Virginia's Blue Ridge. And public service, which is kind of a final catch-all category, including police, fire communications, community meetings, live stream, stormwater communications, and specialty government communications. As an example, in the past 2 weeks, we produced content highlighting Roanoke's ARPA projects, recruitment videos promoting the upcoming city job fair, and our monthly Noke News from the Community Engagement Office. And wrapping things up, RVTV started 30 years ago as a cable channel in partnership with Cox Communications. Today, we still carry 24/7 cablecast signal on Cox, Comcast, Gentel Globe Fiber, Roku, and RVTV.org. What I'm most proud of, however, is that we've adapted our communications to more closely align with the ways that our citizens prefer to take in media and the way our government partners communicate with the public. If you don't already do so, I'd encourage you to follow RVTV on whatever platform you choose to consume media. Most of the content, when produced, is shared to each platform. Note that some of our partners do choose to distribute content only on their platforms, and some of our content is internal in nature and therefore not public-facing. Another way to stay informed is to get text or email notifications at rvtv.org/subscribe. And you can choose to receive notifications whenever any new content is produced, or select from notifications by just municipality or by subject area, business, education, recreation, and public service. So in conclusion, it's really been a pleasure to work with the city's talented communications engagement staff on a daily basis. I'd like to especially thank Angie O'Brien from the city manager's office and Carol Corbin, who stepped into her role a year ago from another position at the city. Both of these ladies have been outstanding to work with. And here at RVTV, we look forward to more great things to come through our partnership with the City of Roanoke as we continue to be Roanoke Valley's civic media resource. I'd like to open up, any council members have questions?
Well, thank you. I agree with you, and especially I've had a chance to work very closely with Carol, Ms. Corbin, and she does a tremendous job. So thank you for the service you provide our city. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Great presentation.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we'll have our second briefing today, and that will be with RASAC on youth drug use and an update.
Great. Good morning.
Good morning.
I used to be on that committee a while back. Good while back.
We are here with the Roanoke Prevention Alliance. So the Roanoke Prevention Alliance is a coalition that works to reduce youth access and use of substance use within the Roanoke city. And today we wanted to speak with you about preventing youth access and use of adult use cannabis. So cannabis was decriminalized in Virginia, meaning somebody 21 and older can possess up to an ounce, or they can grow 4 plants hydroponically in their home or outside in a hidden area. It is still
excuse me. Do you have a handout with that, or?
Yes, sir. Yes, sorry.
Okay.
It should on the front say reducing youth access and use of cannabis. Got it?
Thank
you. So medical cannabis can only be purchased at a dispensary and the closest one to us is in Salem, Rise. I do want to point out that it is still illegal to sell and purchase adult use cannabis in the state of Virginia right now. The plan to have retail sales of adult use cannabis is by January 2024. When a retail market is established in Virginia, local capacities may be able to regulate zoning, hours of operation, and advertising. Throughout our presentation today, we want to be clear that we are only talking about youth access and use of cannabis. We are not talking about medical use or any adult use of cannabis. So why is reducing access in youth important? Reducing access is important as a teen's brain is not yet fully developed until their mid-20s. Therefore, cannabis use in teens can cause difficulties, problem solving, problems with memory and learning. It can impair coordination, and they can have difficulty maintaining attention. The Centers for Disease Control reported that teens that use cannabis have lower graduation rates than compared to teens that do not use cannabis. Also, according to the Centers of Disease Control, cannabis use has been linked to mental health problems such as depression and social anxiety. People who use cannabis are more likely to develop temporary psychosis and long-lasting mental disorders, including schizophrenia. The association between cannabis and schizophrenia is stronger in people who start using cannabis at an earlier age and use more frequently. And as you can see in your booklet there are more on the list that I will let you guys review at a later date. So also, the first page to our booklet is on the screen, but you guys also have it in front of you. It's called Reduce Youth Access to Recreational Cannabis. This booklet was created from the California Scorecard methodology, which identifies 6 primary categories of policies where local government can act to protect youth, public health, and equity. Getting It Right from the Start.org created the scorecard after review of the literature and over 50 in-depth interviews with local jurisdictions, community members, academic and research experts, regulators from other states, legal experts, community coalitions, dispensary owners, laboratory experts, manufacturers, and clinicians working with addiction. So as you look through the booklet, these are the main 6 areas where local capacities can help protect youth, public health, and equity. And as you go through the booklet and you turn from page to page, you'll see there's more in-depth on each category. So for example, you see number 1, retailer and delivery requirements. Then you see caps on number of retailers, distance from youth hangouts, equity in retail locations, health warnings, local permits, independent ID verification process for delivery, and limited destinations. And then as you go through, you'll see a bigger version and more in-depth bullet points there. I also wanted to make you aware that as of now, all localities will be opted into retail sales of adult use cannabis. There may be an opportunity to opt out. However, with legislation, anything can change at any moment. And at this point, I'm going to pass things on to Dion Matthews.
Good morning, council members, mayor.
Good morning.
That's all right. So this is our reference slide. As you see, there's a lot of information here. We want you to have as much information as possible when it comes to protecting our youth. We understand that's a big ask because you have a lot of stuff to do in your day. So going through all this information is tedious, but it is also important. So Delta and THC products in the city of Roanoke. In the city of Roanoke, you can find a variety of unregulated synthetic Delta THC products in most convenience stores and hemp stores and CBD stores. Right now, there's a gray area, and that gray area is saying that people under the age of 21 have access to this, and we're trying to prevent that. All right. Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services issued a press release stating that all edible and drinkable THC Delta products must come off the shelves. In 2021 and 2022, due to a need for more knowledge about the density and proximity of the places that youth congregate, we did some mapping, and we mapped the stores that sell Delta 8 and other THC products. We looked at a variety of things like proximity to places like schools, where kids hang out, where people offer after-school programs. We were looking at things like that, and we're going to continue to do that going forward. We're going to do it for 22 and 23 as well. Just as things change, as Mackenzie just said, things are going to change, and we're going to be keeping an eye trying to find out where those things are and look so that we can regulate where kids are. All right. As you can see on the screen, there's this particular product on the screen is selling both I get a little emotional. Non-nicotine vapes on the bottom, and you can see the hemp vapes on the top. So they're the same product. They're basically all the same flavors that you can see. They're going from one to the other, and there's no difference. In the picture, you see the company Vape Brand. That's the company that's selling those, but there's a variety of those in the area. The Blue Ridge Behavioral Health Prevention and Wellness does a merchant education in the Valley of Roanoke, in the Roanoke Valley. They're seeing that most stores selling non-nicotine vapes that youth can purchase. This is normalizing that for the children. So if they're having access to the non-nicotine vapes, it's only a matter of time before they're transitioning over to the hemp vapes. Our ask, we ask that you carefully review all the information that we provided you today. So between the information that Mackenzie has handed you and all the different reference material that you have, we're asking that you go through it diligently and create a plan for the youth of Roanoke City so that we can do something better for them. We're asking that you don't be reactive. We're asking that you be proactive to reduce the youth access to cannabis in the Roanoke Valley. We want to thank you for your time and consideration. And at this time, if you have any questions, we'd like to address those as well.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you all for the presentation. You mentioned the vapors, and you say 21 and younger. What areas of the city, when you talked about your mapping, where about do you see the stores being? I know the answer, but I wanted you to say it publicly.
So we're seeing density of stores really everywhere that's selling these. I mean, there's really, I want to say there is a very few times I've been in and they don't have these Delta products. Or every store basically has the vape products, but there are very, very few stores in the city of Roanoke that are not selling the Delta products. They're right front and center. As soon as you walk in, you can't miss them. I would say looking at the mapping that we have done, yeah, it's just hard to pinpoint because they're everywhere.
I've seen some where they just openly advertise it.
Oh, yes, there are huge signs.
That's what I'm referring to, where you actually see the signs with the tobacco.
Yes.
And what areas of the city mostly you see that.
It's really hard to pinpoint because really you drive down and you see the big flower that says Delta 8 sold here. Mm-hmm. Those are the products that we're seeing sold. Really, they're really everywhere in the city. Yeah. There's high density anywhere in the city that you go.
Because mostly I've seen it in the inner city parts, outskirts of the inner city. I wouldn't say as much as over in southwest side. I see it in southeast,
right.
And mostly northwest. In the low income areas, you tend to see that. And the other thing is, you mentioned, I think I read where you have the gummies and those kinds of things. Could you speak a little bit more on those, what type that is? I'm not familiar with it. I've just heard about it, and I just want to get the word out for parents, more or less.
Yes, so something important that parents need to remember is that none of these products that we're seeing in these convenience stores are regulated. Mm-hmm. So VCU has done some product testing, and they're seeing that some of these products are having 10 times more the amount than that's labeled on the product. Mm-hmm. The issue with this is we also, since they're not regulated, we do not know what's in them. Right. So if a child does consume one of these products and they're taken to the emergency room, we don't really know what they've ingested. So and we're also seeing that a lot of these kids are having to be hospitalized and some even going to ICU. Mm-hmm. So important thing for parents to remember is to make sure if they are using these products, lock them up high, out of sight, out of reach of youth. After use of these products, make sure you're resealing them and putting them back. And then also making sure you keep them in that same packaging that has the Delta, either the Delta 8 symbol, the THC warning symbol, so that way youth are less likely to use them, as it looks a little bit different, but not much. The packaging is very similar to youth snacks and candies that we see.
Do you have any data as to children that have had to be taken to the emergency room because they have gotten hold to these type of gummies? Do you have any information on that as to how prevalent is that in Roanoke?
In
Salem,
Roanoke,
in the surrounding, I guess in the surrounding areas.
In the surrounding areas as well. I know that of those that have consumed, and I hope I get the statistic right, those that have consumed a Delta 8 product, 89% of them were taken to the hospital, while 8% of those were taken to the ICU.
And that's in Roanoke,
through poison
Valley,
control. Yes, Valley-wide.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And I know you talked about that you can start out with this and it leads to additional substance abuse on other drugs. When we look at that back in the day, and I have to say back in the day when marijuana was just the drug of choice, but I do know that we used to hear that a lot as teenagers, that it did lead to other drugs. And now you have more things that they're calling lacing with the marijuana, and that's been a concern just to see what kids would do. The reaction of lacing it with something harmful, and that's a concern for me when I think about teenagers that you're just innocent and wanting to experiment with drugs. They find themselves being in harm's way.
Yeah, I think something important there to remember is that marijuana has changed. Back in the day, as you say, marijuana maybe had 5% THC. Now we're seeing 99%, 99.9% THC, which is that psychoactive ingredient that gives you the high feeling. So that's where data is showing that youth that are using at an earlier age or using more frequently are having those problems holding their attention, having those, maybe developing those mental disorders of schizophrenia, having those kind of issues because of that higher THC potency.
And where do you find with teenagers, do you have an age where you're finding it being, where they start, what age do you find that children are experimenting with marijuana?
Our YRBS data, so Roanoke Prevention Alliance collects, we use the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. Last year we presented some data to you guys. It did show that marijuana use did go down, so we always love to share that we are so happy our youth are choosing not to use cannabis. However, the data does jump from middle school to high school. So once they enter, so we do 10th and 12th in high school, and then 6th and 8th in middle school. Yes. And we're seeing a jump from middle school to high school.
So you're seeing that it's less in middle school now and more in high school?
Yes.
So you don't have your 11 to 15-year-olds or 12 to 15-year-olds now using cannabis. I still call it marijuana.
Yes. So, but I do want to stress that number did go down in 2021 from 2019. So with the year of COVID and everything, it went down. So, and we will have new data in 2023.
I'd be anxious to hear what
yes.
if it changes up. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to ask, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you for bringing all of this to light for us to help enlighten some of us older folks. Can you tell me what you think might be helpful as members of council? What can we do to help with this, or any suggestions on what we could do? I'm not sure that we can. We'll have further discussion later, but I'd like to at least hear from you on some suggestions and recommendations on things that we can do as council or as the city.
Yes, so with legalization happening by January 2024, we were seeing that local jurisdictions may be able to regulate zoning, advertising, and hours of operation.
Okay.
In the booklet, you'll find that it recommends following ABC, the registration, making sure these stores are registered. And then we are seeing in other states that it is helpful it is reducing youth access when they double ID within these retail stores. Education always helps, educating parents. We often hear marijuana is safe. It's a safer drug to use, but we're seeing these high potency THC products come out, the gummies. Youth are getting in them. So just really educating the parents is a big one too. So anything along those lines.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Certainly, if there's anything that we can do locally as a city, an ordinance or whatever, and I'm sure we can have some further discussion about that. Sometimes a lot of the regulations come from the state level, so that kind of ties our hands. But it's good to know, or have some ideas on what we can do here locally. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for your presentation today. I wanted to ask a question that really you talked about lack of regulation, and I think that's what we're hearing not only from organizations like yours that are working directly with youth, but even with retailers locally. their product lines change based on what's legal and what's illegal, and so there are no regulations currently, or minimal. And I would hope that the state is working to get those regulations in place by the time medical cannabis is available starting in January 2024 for retail. And I want to clarify, it's medical, not just general. Is that
Medical
accurate?
is already available in Salem.
Is this
Rise.
general cannabis that's going to be
Yes, this is
for retail?
adult use cannabis by January 2024. Stores are set to open in they have not passed anything. So the plan through the state is to have it by January 2024 and stores opening in 2025.
Okay, okay. All right. Well, I guess my bigger question is, and how this intersects with working with youth. You talked about working to create a plan. I don't know what the current status of the guidelines are in the state, and I don't know if that's something that city staff could help us get a briefing on from the state, because, you know, localities need to be ahead of the game on this, and if we don't have direction from the state, it's hard for us to navigate. I mean, we can create a plan, but then if it doesn't align with the state guidelines and regulations, we're gonna have to start over again, and we don't, you know, it's not effective use of our time. But I also wondered if the collective response that's been focused on opioids and other substance abuse disorder and drugs, I'm not sure if they're looking at this as well. So I offer that to say, perhaps we could engage the organizations locally, you all, other prevention organizations, the collective response, in being proactive in asking the state questions. Is it the board, regulation board, or cannabis? What's the board?
Cannabis Control Authority.
Yeah, Cannabis Control Authority.
Okay.
And
Go ahead.
Well, they'll take over control over some of the regulations from VDAX, and the plan is, I believe, in 2024 or 2025. They'll take over that responsibility. I'll save my comments for
Okay.
that.
I won't come to you, I want to
Yeah.
talk to you a little bit about the state plan.
And I did want to share too, Cannabis Control Authority is planning to visit all health sectors. They have it on their calendars now that they are supposed to come April 14th is what they said their last meeting. Yes.
So this is the comment I was going to make earlier and forgot about it. We actually worked with the VCCA to have them come to Roanoke. They're going to be here on April 19th. At the Higher Education Center. So I want to thank Wayne Leftwich for helping us get them here in Roanoke. So I think that'll be a great time for us as a city and locality, all involved stakeholders, to go and see what's going on with cannabis and how they're going to be rolling that out.
Thank you.
So, thank you. I just wanted to clarify what our role can be in that, and to acknowledge the organizations that are already taking the lead on trying to identify potential concerns and issues and what we're already seeing in the community. And I appreciate your advocacy for our youth. There's so much out there that's enticing and can be very frustrating and challenging for parents, especially as they're trying to help their youth navigate these things. So thank you all for your hard work.
Thank you.
Mr. Pruitt, could you share with us?
First, thank you for your presentation. I think when the General Assembly raised the smoking age from 18 to 21 in 2019, I very much saw that as a precursor for steps to set up a regulated market. They really haven't taken all the steps that they need to get that in place, and there's some disagreements between the House and the Senate, and I think leadership in the General Assembly. But as part of our legislative update that we get from Advanced Strategies, I'd asked them to go over, there were a couple pieces of legislation this year, including regulating the amount of THC that's in hemp products, because people will buy things now that will have a high content that are meant for either a topical application or otherwise, and those have largely been unregulated until recently, and we're not sure if the governor is going to sign the bill that's come in front of him or if he's going to make some amendments to it. But I expect this to be a continuing topic for some time, and really at the local level, I think what we can be most helpful with, as it seems we still all have questions, is that education aspect and putting out what the right information is and trying to do what we can to further limit youth use. I mean, I used to smoke cigarettes. I remember how many times it took to quit. I remember someone telling me before I smoked my first one not to do it. and just recommend to anyone and not to get into that in the first place. And I think raising that smoking age to 21 was an important piece of it, but making sure that we have a good regulated market in place for responsible adult use will help separate out youth use rising. There's no question really there, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your presentation. All right.
Mr. Mayor, we will proceed with our third briefing this morning. As Amelia and Paul make their way up, I'd like to remind council and our viewing audience that each month the city manager brings a budget briefing to council about the budget process and where we currently are in its development. As we've mentioned in the past, we will continue with refinement of what we've presented to council in the past, as well as a lot of other pieces of the budget that we are working with, as well as bring you new components to the budget along the way. And today is, once again, our third presentation on budget to council. We continue that refinement. Plus, today we'd like to bring one item of potential fees that have been presented to the budget team during the process this year, and we have some staff available today to make some brief presentations on that. As well, we will review revenues and expenditure development to date with the budget. And one of the things on the fees that we'd like to mention is we are not looking for any action today from council. Some of these we've talked about for several years, and they have been brought forward by staff again, and a couple may be something that has risen from last budget year to this. But with that, please, we'll introduce Amelia Merchant, our Deputy Director of Finance, and Paul Workman, who's our budget manager today, for the presentation.
Thank you, Brad. Good morning, Amelia.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I refer to this as our most favorite time of the year as we are developing the budget for the next fiscal year, and also as we report to you at your second meeting of the month the status of the current fiscal year. Today, as Brent just indicated, we will be talking about our budget development status and where we are. I'm going to cover for you the revenue portion of things and introduce the fee adjustments, and our staff, fellow staff members will speak with you about that, and Paul will talk with you about the expenditure side of the budget. First, today we start as our first opportunity for us to present a full revenue estimate for fiscal '24 based on the current information that we have. As additional months in the current fiscal year are closed and we receive additional information from various sources, including the Commonwealth of Virginia, these estimates will continue to be refined. Slide 3, as you see here, shows potential local tax performance of about $6.4 million above the adopted budget. An appropriate calculation would be necessary for Visit Virginia's Blue Ridge due to the performance of the transient occupancy tax. That's approximately $220,000, and 40% for Roanoke City Public Schools, which is approximately $6 million. On that basis, conservatively, estimates have been developed for each of our local taxes shown here by category. Our real estate tax growth year over year is estimated currently at 9.52%. The impact of the appeals that are currently in process is likely to reduce this amount. The final decisions are not anticipated until later this month or early next month. You may also recall, and for the new council members, as the revenue estimate is shared with us by real estate valuation, we only count 95% of that potential revenue. From a historical perspective, we have collected typically 95% of the potential revenue over the last 10 years. So that is the rationale for only counting 95% of what that potential could be. Our sales tax has continued to perform well, and should the 10% over budget level hold, a 13% growth level for fiscal '24 seems appropriate at this time. Our transient occupancy growth of potentially 14% over the adopted fiscal '23 level leads to a conservative 21.3% growth level that will be reevaluated as the month of February closes. A year-over-year growth level of 1.68% for prepared food and beverage tax will also be reevaluated as the month of February closes and final adjustments are made as the PCI system full implementation goes forward. Also, as we have conversations with the Commissioner of Revenue, the personal property estimate conservatively stands at a growth rate of 1.68%. The business license tax also is likewise to be developed collaboratively with the Commissioner and reevaluated over the next month in collaboration with that office. Other fiscal '23 projections standing at a 3.6% performance over budget and a fiscal '24 1.79% estimate year over year include those items that are noted at the bottom of the slide, inclusive of our district taxes, penalties and interest, admissions tax, and other local taxes. The total estimated local tax growth for today, fiscal '24 over fiscal '23 adopted level, totals $16.87 million or 7.4%. I'll pause here to see if you have any questions before I proceed.
Yes. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Amelia. I was just curious, and I think you've shared some of this in terms of longer-term projections, but looking at extended projections for real estate tax and sales tax, where we've seen, and even prepared foods and beverage, where we've seen a fairly significant increase for this year and 24. Are you all able to project yet whether that's going to be those increases are going to be sustained, or are they going to level out? Do you know yet?
The predictability of that is very difficult. What we're predicting, even in what we presented today, is consumer behavior,
right.
Which at this point I would not say we can safely predict too far in advance of what those are. Because we were very conservative in our estimates for fiscal '22, we are reaping the benefit of some of that in our '23 performance over budget, as well as some of the projections for fiscal '24. We're able to take advantage of some of that. I'm leery of going too far beyond that, unless we are just month by month reviewing and updating those estimates.
Okay,
but again, it's consumer behavior that we're predicting.
Yes. Mr. Cobb, if I point out the last column to the right of there, you see the 9.5, 13, 21.3.
Right.
That is, as Amelia mentioned, a lot of that is catching up from the conservative estimates through the pandemic. I doubt very seriously any of those categories will maintain those that level of percentage increase at this time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Especially not the 21.33%.
Right. Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Just a question about the transient occupancy tax. You said that 21% is rather conservative. Does that take into account just a potential of any kind of recession or reduced consumer spending? And is this increased rate more the result of more rooms being used, or is it also like a higher cost of these hotel rooms and the tax being collected?
There is the impact of inflation that we are seeing, and thus the comment that we're not going to sustain that level. As we look at how the performance continues to proceed, as we come back to you in April, you are likely to see that number a little lower than what it is now, but we need to let the numbers play themselves out and have the basis for standing on those numbers. But they are impacted by our inflation impacts. I would not say it's necessarily based on a higher room rate. It's not, those estimates are not connected to any analysis from that perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mel.
Okay. As we look here on slide 4, the estimated local tax revenue increase that we just discussed is divided into 4 components. The first that is shown here is $25,100 that is specifically for the district taxes. And that is the revenue increase that is included in the number that was shared with you. The second component that must be carved out is 3/8 of the transient occupancy tax growth that will be allocated specifically for Visit Virginia's Blue Ridge based on the agreed-upon formula. The remaining $16.5 million is divided by formula with Roanoke City Public Schools, with, again, 40% being allocated to the school division, and as you see here, approximately $6.6 million, with the remaining $9.9 million left available for city general uses. On slide 5, we begin to look at our total revenue estimate shown here. As we move beyond the first line of the 7.4% local tax growth estimate, we see a full revenue estimate of $346.5 million, and that is a 6.7% increase. Though this growth amount is $21,758,000, only $14,792,280 is the city's share of that growth to be retained for general uses. As we look closer at a few of the larger growth categories, we start with revenue from the use of money and property. The Budget Committee is deliberating over the best mechanism to utilize to recognize the anticipated revenue here due to its source being interest earned on ARPA funds that are anticipated to be decreasing and not available all of fiscal '24 and not available after fiscal '24. So again, we have to consider carefully how we build that into the budget and at what level, considering those factors. Within the 5.3% growth in the intergovernmental category, there are revenues specifically offset by expenses that are growing in the social services area. We have also anticipated recognizing increases in revenue from the Commonwealth for HB 599 funding. In summary, on this slide, the estimated year-over-year growth today is 6.7%, or $21.758 million, of which the city's share would be $14.79 million. We anticipate the month of February closing in the next week, and we'll be updating these FY23 projections and FY24 estimates. Any questions before we proceed here?
All right.
Ms. Merchant, I just have a quick question. So basically on that revenue from use of money, the last report I saw, it looked like we had for ARPA about 42 million, is that right? Something like that?
No, ma'am.
What is that amount? I'm just wondering what it would look like once those funds have been completely depleted. Because the ARPA money is not going to be there forever, so those percentages, I'm sure, would change. I see you nodding over there. It will come down.
Yes, it will come down. I'm looking real quick here to give you an estimate on prior performance.
If you can't find it, that's fine. I was just curious what the number would look like ordinarily without that ARPA money sitting there that has not been used
We'll get
yet.
a historical look back to you all of what that is over the last 5 years.
That would be helpful, but it's not urgent.
Okay.
Thank you.
May I just piggyback on what you said, Ms. Whiteboard? What other revenue from this use of money and property, what else is included in that? I know the ARPA money and all of that is in, but what else is in this category?
Okay. Let me pull that specifically for you. Specifically in that category, there are credit card fees and interest revenue are the primary sources there. We also have rental of miscellaneous properties for various buildings, leases, Elmwood Park, open space rentals, countryside rentals, things of that sort.
Okay, that helps me, okay.
Does that, you got another?
No, I just was going to wait on Ms. Whiteboard to finish.
Oh, no,
I just-
I'm finished.
Okay, I just had another question because I just see the categories, but not sure what's all located in. What is under your local taxes? What consists of the local taxes?
All of these categorical items here, under, of course, under real estate, there is real estate and delinquent real estate. Sales tax stands alone. Transient occupancy is itself and delinquent transient occupancy. Under personal property.
No, I mean just under the category of local taxes that you have here.
It is.
That is, it would be all
slide
of those
3.
that-
Oh, it's all
of
these are
right,
considered,
yeah.
oh, I see it, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
your slide
Okay.
3.
I guess I was looking for where your cigarette tax and all of that comes in.
That is also
Okay.
under the other category.
Okay, I didn't see it down there under the other, that's why I was asking. That's all other district and blah, blah, blah. But I didn't see the cigarette and all of that listed. So
Yes.
that's why I was asking.
That's
Okay.
captured under the other category.
Okay, I'm good, thank you.
That it, Ms.?
Yes, sir, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Amelia.
Okay. All right, I believe that takes us here to slide 6. And for fiscal '24, as Brent mentioned, there are potential fee adjustments for consideration, some of which we'd like to share with you today. If the Budget Committee determines that there are others that need to be brought forward, perhaps in the area of Parks and Recreation, we will do so at a future briefing. They are not included today and still under consideration. The affected areas that we'd like to present to you today include those that are listed here: building inspection fees, fire EMS fees, and monthly parking fees. And we have here in the chamber today those who will come forward to share with you information regarding these potential fee adjustments before we turn our attention to the expenditure and balancing status for fiscal '24. So I'd like to call on 3 individuals. First, Chris Chittum, who will speak to us about building inspection fees. David Hoback, our fire chief, who will speak about fire EMS fees, and Brian Mann, who will speak about monthly parking fees.
Thank you, Amelia. Good morning. So last time we adjusted our building inspection fees, I had no gray hair. It was a long time ago.
Long time ago, huh?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. They were last adjusted in 2005. And at that point, they were actually lowered because we were bringing in more revenue than we actually needed to operate the program. So all localities are by state code required to administer a building inspection program administering the Virginia Construction Code. And then they also build in the responsibility to collect the fees from building permits to cover the cost, the local costs of the program. We of course monitor those revenues versus costs of the program from year to year. Our permit construction varies wildly from year to year. It's often plus or minus $100,000. I mean, it varies quite a bit. So really keeping a pulse on what's going to happen next year is quite difficult, if not impossible. What we have, so when we see a shortfall, we're like, well, okay, is that an aberration or is that a trend? And so now we have several years where we have fallen short of covering our local expenses of $200,000 to $400,000. So we are seeing a defined shortfall. So we feel we need to increase those fees, make some adjustments so that we bring in enough money to cover the cost of the program. And then that way the operation is borne by those who are using the service, right? So it's not just generally spread among everybody else. So with that, so we're not supporting the program right now. We've got a target of what our expenses are, and we've run a model based on our calendar year 2022 activity, and come up with some adjustments. One of the things we wanted to do is keep a small project fairly inexpensive. So we're raising, we propose to raise the fee of $45. Thank you. I saw it on my screen here, so I'm sorry, I apologize for that. So the base fee for the first $1,000, which is the way they're structured, bring that up to $50, which is a modest increase. So somebody building a deck or a small project, den, kitchen renovation or something like that would only see a pretty modest increase. It's in the multiplier, as we call it, where we're going to see a significant, actually restructuring. What we've got now is a situation where the, you'll have this buried in the details, I think, at the end of your presentation slides there, but currently we've got a kind of a complex system where as you get farther up with a more expensive project, you actually pay less. So it's like, a progressive income tax, you pay a higher tax rate. This is the opposite of that. It's a regressive fee structure, so that the larger your project is, you start paying less for your permit fees. But our cost, the city's cost for those services, don't go down. They remain constant. An inspection is an inspection is an inspection. And likewise with the plan review fees. So we're proposing that we eliminate that arrangement that we've had in place for a while, and just go with a flat fee of what we're proposing is $670. Now I will have to qualify that a little bit. We have to pay 2% of our permit fees back to the state. So rather than support our program locally, we actually have to send them 2% of all of the fees that we collect to cover a training program that they run. So back planning actually will end up being about $6.57, and then we tack that 2% on the end of that. That's just an order of operations and algebra kind of stuff. So and so the additional revenue that we bring in, about the same, regardless of how you calculate, about $760,000, which will get us to about, we hope, assuming again that revenue is about like it was last year, that will bring in right at the amount of revenue to cover the cost of the program. So I'm ready to answer any questions that you might have about that.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chittum, thank you. I just have one quick question. The additional revenue, the $760,000, do you have it broken down on what those costs are that we are incurring that we're not breaking even on? I mean, you said, our costs, but I would like to see where those costs are exceeding what we should be earning, I guess, or getting for those permits or whatever, that we need the additional funds. A little breakdown would help, because then that would help us see where we need the additional revenue. And I'm not seeing it on here, but I'm just wondering, is there a place where I can get that?
I can provide that to you, Ms. Whiteboard. Most of it is personnel, the inspectors,
okay, that's fine.
The permit tax,
Yeah.
and the folks that we actually have very little operational expenses other than vehicles to get people to inspections, the cost of our permit system, the software, but most of it is people. It's the expenses the personnel expenses that go along with that. Glad to provide that. We have historic data going back quite a number of years that we've built into this. So sure.
That would be helpful. You may not realize it, but we have residents and folks watching, and so when they can
Yeah.
see this information, they can
Yes.
understand why it is necessary for us sometimes to do the things that we do and the adjustments that we make,
Sure.
especially when you're talking about potential increases. So if we could see that, it's just helpful to make it easier for us when we have to make those kinds of decisions where people can actually see why it's needed and why it's important.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions?
Ms. Pretty.
So, question for, if this increase occurs, will larger projects that are already maybe under contract and have started, will their fees be grandfathered in, or only if they've already gotten the permit?
So the way we would work, that's a great question because that always comes up, and we do think through how this is going to play out. If somebody applies for a permit, if it goes into effect July 1st, if somebody applies for a permit on June 30th, they would use the old permit, old fee system. July 1, this new version would kick in. So it depends on when they make application.
Okay.
So if we see our fees going up, obviously we have a kind of a rush for people obtaining permits in June. But yeah, that's the way we would work that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's when they apply when they submit the application to us.
Hopefully, if this goes forward, then there'll be a plus. We'll see a lot of construction around a small period of time happening in the city.
Well, I think, based on some projects that have been actually coming through council in the past few months, we will see, even if there is a recession, we will have a lot of activity, building activity in the city. It's just it's teed up and ready to go. So we're not really projecting any reduction in construction activity at this point.
Thank you.
Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Thank you, Mayor. My question centers around, as always, dealing with the surrounding localities, especially Roanoke County. And as we always hear, that the city's always taxing. They're always going up on their taxes. So with your building inspection fees that you have listed here, how do they compare with the county?
They're going to be more.
Okay.
And we look at those and we see ourselves as, look, we've got to cover our expenses and not necessarily base our permit fees and structure based on what our neighbors are doing. And often these fees get locked in and they kind of work on inertia more than anything. So they stay the same for a long time. And indeed, that's what's happened with us. And so over time, you realize that you're not covering your expenses and you're not being responsible, basically, because you're supposed to cover your expenses plus or minus 5% with these fees. So I would say that, I don't know what Roanoke County's revenues versus their expenses are, but that's really a budgetary item for them to consider, likewise with Salem and every other locality that operates a program.
So could that possibly be, and I know I'm asking questions that maybe not have an answer, but could that possibly be, we're charging more to cover our expenses? Does it have anything to do with the policies that we have in place when one comes to get a permit?
I wouldn't think.
Deal with inspections or permits, working with I guess with the building department. I know I do. You hear more from the community who are into construction primarily, how hard it is to get certain things done through the building department, as well as is at ease when they go into the county.
Well, I would say that our processes, our policies, our codes are precisely the same as they are in most other localities.
Okay.
Now, I mean, the building code is the building code in Roanoke, Virginia Beach,
yes, I
Richmond.
understand that from the Unified Building
Yeah.
Code, the BOCA and all.
Right.
I understand that. I guess I'm just looking at your policies, the city's policies as to what is required when they come in to get a permit, those type of things. I know enough to just be dangerous of just asking the question.
Those really shouldn't vary from locality to locality. You need a building plan in some cases, sometimes you don't. We need to verify that contractors are licensed. That's uniform across the state. everybody's got the same set of rules. And so we often hear stories. Let me tell you that Roanoke County hears that Roanoke City is so awesome, and Roanoke County, and so this is kind of stories that propagate that are perception based rather than, so and somebody can have an individual difficulty with an individual project and kind of cast that to all, to everything. So, but
I just wanted to dispel the rumors. I just wanted to speak to it, just so that the public could hear it from within.
I can tell you, we work very hard to make that process as easy as possible, and we take action. We change policies. We make improvements throughout the year to try to make that as painless a process as we possibly can. That makes it easier on us. That makes it a little bit easier, and to help change that perception that people have.
Well, I thank you for that.
Thank you. It's a good question. Quick question.
Just to piggyback off of that perception, with this additional revenue, do you feel that that'll make it easier for businesses to be able to get those licenses or those permits that they need?
I will tell you, and I don't know how much we want to talk about it at this point, but we would like to bring on another permit tech, and we've built in enough to cover that. That will become a decision later on in the budget process as to whether we can afford that. But that has been for years just processing the amount of activity that we're seeing. Despite all of our process improvements, you need people to help move permits through the process. And we see that as, we would love to have it so when something comes in, we're there with a catcher's mitt and ready to process the permit and get it back in their hands. That's simply not possible with our current staffing levels. And there's more delay than any of us want to see in that process. And so we're throwing personnel at it, we're throwing process improvements at it. We've wrung as much as we can out of what we've got in terms of our personnel levels. So we are looking at there being an enhancement in the process that comes along with this additional cost. So
thank you.
All right. Any more questions? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, we are proposing for this year, and we've done it for many years in the past, but I want to give you a little history. I've been with the city for about 38 years, and back in 1989, the city started their own, the first paid paramedic program. And with that, we implemented a fee-for-service for our ambulance transports. Back then, our fee was $100 for a basic life support transport, and then $130 for advanced life support transport. Back then, it helped augment and support the hiring of, I think it was 21 people back in '89 to supplant the volunteer services that were in place in the city. Over the years, we have grown from what was 3 ambulances to now we're having to staff 12 ambulances to keep up with demand for service. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a steady growth. Over the last 10 years, we've seen a steady growth of EMS demand in our city without not necessarily a growth in population. This most recent year, we've seen about a 5% growth in EMS demand, but not only that, we've seen a growth in population density that is creating some problems for us to be able to maintain services throughout. So what we've proposed, went back to our EMS billing contractor, like we've done in years past, to say, what is our market value for providing service and what should we be charging for ambulance transports in our city? What you have before you is what our Digitech, which is our EMS contractor, has recommended. We try to stay about 120% of what Medicare allows, and we don't look at Medicaid, but Medicare allowances. So the fees that we're looking up here are what we're proposing which is a revenue estimate about $350,000, which is a conservative revenue estimate. I also go back to 1989 when I first was hired in and was in charge of buying ambulances. We paid $38,000 for the first ambulance I ever purchased. Today, they're $300,000 non-equipped, but fully equipped, they're $450,000. We asked the question about looking around our neighbors and where we are and what we set with regards to market value. The proposed fees that we have before you are in line with Salem. They're below Botetourt, they're below Bedford, they're below, I think they're below Franklin, and they're below Salem. Roanoke County is proposing an increase this year. However, they will still be below us, but they have a higher percentage of collections. They're in a 90 percentile collection rate, where we're right around 63 to 65%. But they are proposing an increase, as well as Bedford's going to go up in their fee for service. We really try to look at where our market is for Medicare and then where we need to be. So we're asking the City Council to support a fee adjustment for our ambulance service, that will go in effect July 1. We ask about what the money would be going for. We do, in addition to the escalating cost, we have a budget request in to put an ambulance at Station 14. That is a growing area. Over the last 4 or 5 years, we've experienced about a 40% growth in demand down there. We have a new apartment complex that's being designed down there, the largest in the city or largest in the valley. And we also have phase 2 and phase 3 of the dependent care facility that is starting up down there as well, along with 2 residential developments that are being built. So that area, with only 2 accesses to that area, which is through Vinton or 460, we're not meeting performance indicators. So we're asking that we make an adjustment, 20% up in our fee for ambulance services, and that we are able to use that money.
Thanks, Mayor.
Vice Mayor?
Chief, just a quick question. How long have the current rates been in place?
About 7 years. We've been a while since we adjusted. We did adjust our non-transport fee, and we did impose that where we have a response and evaluation fee several years ago. But our current fees, I think, have been in place since 2015.
Thank you.
And again, we haven't made any market adjustments.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I know the last thing we want is for anyone to not call 911 when they see that we're going to have an increase in fees potentially in the city. You talked about the collection rate. What is the process when someone has the inability to pay?
We do what all the other jurisdictions do throughout our area. We do soft billing. We do not pursue collections. Those people who are on Medicaid, Medicare will not realize any change in their status because we can only bill what those allowances are. Those people who have private pay or vehicle accidents or through workers' comp, those are the individuals who will see that increase in fee structure. But again, we do soft billing, three mail outs, and then we do not pursue collection.
Thank you. I think that's important.
Anybody else? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning, City Council. So for this year's budget look at, just a real quick look back on the history of the parking fund for the new City Council members. We are an enterprise account, so we cover all of our own expenses and we produce all of our own revenues. So a little bit different that we don't roll up to the city's general budget. We do have a few rate increases for this year's budget term, $5 for general monthly, $10 for resident, and $2.50 for student. The main reason for this is to cover our new security cost. Back in December, we hired private security. With the increase of, the transient population and the decrease in the amount of officers we had, I felt it was really important that we get some type of security in the parking garages. So through the RFP process, we did that, and since December, we've had great presence of security. That cost is $186,000. So with our increased $223,000 in revenue, almost all of that will be going to cover the security costs. The other costs will be our capital maintenance needs. We're not part of the city's CIP, so we have to generate all of our own revenues. So the extra revenue that will be generated would be used to offset the capital costs that we have on a yearly basis. And that's real short and sweet, and that's open for any questions.
Mr. Wilson.
What are the current parking rates that are going to be increased?
Sure. So those are the rates that will be increasing. If you scroll down to the appendix, it'll give you an overview of what those are specifically.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, okay, got it.
Basically, we're increasing monthly parking by $5 a month. We're increasing residential parking by $10 a month. And the student parking, which we really don't have a lot, is just increasing $2.50 a month.
Thank you.
I have a question, as it relates to CIP and the security, are they able then to respond when I've seen a number of issues posted on social media when there's when the gate won't let people out of certain garages? Will the security be able to help respond in those situations?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, they've already helped and aided in those processes. So we've trained them, the security officers, on like letting people out of the gate if there is a problem. Now, there is a call button on the gate. Sometimes people don't see that. If they press that, within 30 seconds, we pay for a service that somebody's supposed to be able to get on that line and open that gate if there's a problem. But yeah, they've already assisted with letting people out of the gates, and we've just seen a really great response to the security in general.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Brian. I hope your arm gets better.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just would like to point out once again from the fee presentations that you received today that once again no action is needed by council, and over the next month and a half we'll bring additional information, some questions that were asked back to you for your approval or not approval, and sure we'll have conversations with the city manager, with board council members along the way. Paul is getting ready to review with you the supplemental requests that we've seen, just kind of an overall summary. And do want to interject at this point that consistent with the city manager prior meetings, wanted to reemphasize the fact that we are still looking as a top priority, our top line expenditures, and those are, as we've mentioned to council before, compensation, retirement, capital, and schools are always in that list of top priorities there. So that's been the primary focus. The supplementals, I think we've indicated to the council that those are going to be very looked at this year because of those top line expenditures. So I will turn that over to Paul to give you an overview of what those are right now, and we are still working through those questions with the operating departments as we move along. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor Cobb, members of City Council. For the next few minutes, I'd like to give you an update on our balancing status. At this stage, it is very early in the Budget Committee's work as we continue to review and scrutinize budget requests. Slide 10 shows the general fund supplemental requests above the base budget and nets off any associated revenues when they are dependent on expenditure requests. I do want to mention that this is an updated slide from what was maybe provided to you earlier or later on in the week, last week, as we've done some reclassifications between the different categories and priorities. You'll see that we've split the requests between non-discretionary and discretionary. Non-discretionary requests are going to be mandatory or contractual requirements or sustained existing levels of service despite inflationary impacts. These are the areas where we have very little control over. Discretionary requests are everything else and typically are the first areas that we look at when we're balancing the budget. Part of the review process is also looking at non-discretionary requests to ensure that they are indeed unavoidable. As you can see, we have net supplemental requests of about $19.5 million. This does not include the potential revenue enhancement of $760,000 related to the building inspections fee, which you were just briefed on. It does, however, include the fire EMS feed that Chief Hoback went over, and the reason that that is included is because it is also tied to an expense related to the implementation of a new Medic 14 unit. The largest non-discretionary request is education, and due to the 40% tax sharing formula with the schools, and it has an increase of $6.6 million. Community safety non-discretionary funding needs are for fire EMS temp wages for the $15 per hour minimum that were previously scheduled to be funded through ARPA. Inflationary medical supplies as well, and absorbing of various costs that were formerly funded through grants. Human Services is seeing an increase in overtime related to adult protective services and CSA alternative private day school, most of which is offset by revenues provided from the state or Roanoke City Public Schools. Infrastructure non-discretionary items are mostly fleet repair costs, outsourced facility repairs such as HVAC, roofing, plumbing, and purchased trade services. The largest non-discretionary item in the livability priority includes fully funding the $15 per hour minimum for parks and rec and libraries, as well as funding the operating costs of the new Washington Park pool. And a smaller but worthy to mention cost is the environmental cleanup of homeless encampments that we're seeing more of. The largest request in the good government priority is related to risk management requests for increased insurance costs. Other costs in the good government are related to contractual technology software maintenance, required staff training, employee health clinic contractual increases, and others. The economy priority has a non-discretionary supplemental request related to equipment replacement needs. And then I have two separate slides that will give more information on the non-departmental and external agencies, but I will of course point out for the non-departmental discretionary item of 9.5 up there, 9 million of that is related to a placeholder for compensation. On slide 11, illustrates the requests for external agency funding, and these are the largest of the increases as well as the decreases that have been requested. Of course, the Budget Committee will continue to go through these and review their requests and make adjustments as necessary. But I will point out that some of these are non-discretionary as well as discretionary. Those that are non-discretionary are typically formula funded, or there's an agreement in place already that we have very little control over. The largest of the non-discretionary increases is Visit Virginia Blue Ridge, which is tied to sharing of the transient occupancy tax. The second largest is Roanoke Valley Television, which you just heard is a intergovernmental agreement. The Hotel Roanoke Conference Center, which is tied to a 1% special sales tax collected at the hotel. And the two service district taxes of downtown and near the Williamson Road area. The discretionary increases are often tied to more programmatic requests, such as the Roanoke Arts Commission, which is to fund a growing list of applications and to help offset declining ARPA dollars. Mill Mountain Zoo is requesting additional funds to help mitigate safety concerns and upgrade security. We have a new request from the Youth Athletics Review Board. And finally, shown is an increase in funding request for Center in the Square to help fund operations. Nearly all of the decreases are non-discretionary, as you might expect. Blue Ridge Behavioral Health Care is coming down due to an allocation based on clients served for fiscal year 24. The Health Department local funding is being reduced, while state funds are increased as a result of a JLARC study that examined local funding for health departments statewide. And finally listed is the reduction in funding for the Broadband Authority based on previously anticipated reductions in operating funding levels. Moving
Oh,
on.
could
Yeah.
you- let me just ask you a question on,
Sure.
have we reached the peak on broadband, the Roanoke Valley Broadband Authority? So you got they're in the decreased category.
The current budget request includes an operating subsidy of $200,000, which is a decrease from fiscal year '23 funding of $250,000, as well as debt service that is tied to some bonds for funding for that. So there is continued.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, to add on to that, I believe we are about at the end of the projected time. The authority, and Tim, you may jump in on that, sort of decided they were going to have these allocations in place. We've sort of reached the 5-year period of that, I believe. Is it 5 years? Something like that. And so it's time to rethink or continue along with the Broadband Authority. So I think at the Broadband Authority's Board of Directors, along with the city representation, I believe they're beginning to have some of those discussions.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask a question on that, Mayor, with regards to the broadband? So does that mean that at some point you're going to disband the authority or look to go in a different direction since it's not performing the way it originally was set out to?
Well, and I don't think it's not performing the way it was originally set. I think it's performing exactly the way it was originally designed. However, I believe, and Tim, I wasn't here at the city when that was done. I can't remember the time period from the startup till the projection period. I think it was 5 to 8 years or so. We've sort of arrived at that point in time. Things are going well with the Broadband Authority. I think as internal discussions is, so what is now the future of the Broadband Authority? To continue as it was, to build a customer base there, or should they branch out with our other partners in the valley to look at other projects or other directions? So I'm not sure, and I don't want to get ahead of the other localities. We've really had that discussion.
I'd be interested to hear more on it because that's not what I was hearing in the public. That's why I was asking. Okay.
Thank you.
And of course, if I might, one of the main incentives, if you will, of the Broadband Authority was to prop the private sector to build things out.
Right.
And with Glow Fiber, you're starting to see that. So I think that Brent's correct, that at least on that front, you've got to call it a success because we have greater access to broadband in our valley than we had prior to the Broadband Authority.
Thank you. Mr. Pritchard.
Mr. Mayor, I just have a question about the external agency adjustments. And first, just a quick comment about the Broadband Authority. I think when it was put in place, this was far before the large influx of funds from the state to really set out broadband under the Virginia Telecommunications Initiative. So their purpose might need to change largely because of that. But regarding the increases for the center in the square, you said those were just to fund operations. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I believe we provide some support to the Harrison Museum. I wasn't sure if that's tied directly to this, or is this something else that Center in the Square directly is looking for?
It is included as well with the Center in the Square. They help them pull their application together and send it all over in one package. But there is no increased request for Harrison. I believe that covers some operations as well as rent for the.
How much is the increase sought for Center in the Square? Are you aware off the top of your head? I just don't have an index in here that points to these broken out as much as the fees.
It is $25,000.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay. And I'll point out that this list is not the full comprehensive list of all outside external agencies that we fund. These were just the largest ones where we were seeing either an increase or a decrease.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask another question with regards to that? The Youth Athletics Review Board, what is they getting? What is for that?
Their request is for $40,000, and I can't at this time tell you more specifics about what is included in that request. The Budget Committee is yet to review that in detail.
And the Arts Commission?
That is an increased request to fund the growing number of requests that the Arts Commission is receiving. At the current funding levels, it is only funding, don't quote me on this, but about 50% of the requests that are coming in. And so they would like to increase that funding to be able to provide more for the programs that are in there. And with the drying up of some of the ARPA funds, this will help sustain some of those programs that are in existence.
Okay.
Mayor Lee, forgive me for speaking twice. I would just like to point out, especially with regards to the Arts Commission, something that failed to make it into our strategic plan directly was showing the benefit of economic development that we have from our arts and the coverage with Virginia's Blue Ridge and what it's doing for our businesses locally. So we understand there is a return seen somewhere for that investment that we're making.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I took that from you.
Moving on to slide 12, shows our non-departmental enhancements. We will continue to refine the enhancement totals in several areas of the non-departmental section. For example, changes in debt service funding levels will be determined on long-term funding growth strategies related to our capital improvement plan. Given strategies laid out in a couple of weeks, we feel it may be possible to forego the need to grow debt service in fiscal year 24. Debt service tied to the Berglund Center will, however, increase slightly. Any changes in the Berglund Center subsidy will likely be determined on how compensation impacts its operations. From the admissions tax is increasing the number of shows that we see at the Berglund Center, and we're continuing to see a rebound in that tax from the effects of the COVID pandemic. GRTC is anticipating a subsidy increase of around $350,000, and that would maintain their current level of services. The largest planning figure in the non-departmental category is, as I mentioned before, $9 million tied to compensation. And then the last two increases are $250,000 each for workers' compensation and funding for the risk reserve. Total enhancements in the non-departmental category so far sit at about $10.14 million. And will certainly be refined further between now and our next briefing in April. So this brings us to slide 13, which is our balancing status. And this shows the culmination of all the revenue adjustments presented by Amelia at the beginning, as well as the expenditure enhancements that I provided, which leaves us with a current deficit of $4.3 million. As you know, we are required to adopt a balanced budget and therefore have more work ahead of us to help close this gap. If moved forward, the building inspection fee restructuring would reduce this gap by an additional $760,000. So what are our next steps? On the revenue slide, we will continue to refine our estimates with the benefit of time to help us do so. On the expenditure side, we will continue to analyze, study, and collaborate to ensure budget requests are adequate, proper, and align with our strategic values. A large portion of this is structuring of a compensation package, which will be conveyed in more detail at a future briefing. On March 20th, we plan on presenting our long-term capital program strategies, and we'll hear a presentation from our municipal advisors. On April 3rd, we will begin our next budget briefing as we provide another update on the budget development. And at this meeting, we'll also give an update on our enterprise funds, the parking, civic facilities, and stormwater funds. And then from there, we have April 17th, the recommended budget, April 25th, our public hearing, May 1st, budget study, leading us to May 8th, which is the budget adoption. And at this point, I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a question. I just have I guess a comment or just wondering, during our budget retreat back when we had it in November, I believe it was, we had asked, at least it was asked, that during the upcoming budget, when you do your briefings, we wanted to know what the outsources were, what we were outsourcing, and how much money was being used for outsources such as the mowing, after-school programs, recreation, and I don't know if the colleagues want to mention any others, but we had asked Bob for that, and I don't know when, during this budget presentation time period, we will get that information.
Okay, we can work on that at a
Okay.
future presentation.
All right,
And
appreciate
I'll perhaps get with you to find out more specifics about some of the details that you'd like
Okay.
to see.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to point out for the public watching at home, the April 25th, 7 p.m. public hearing is on the recommended budget, but also will cover the taxes and proposed fees that'll be put in the recommended budget, a lot of what we've seen here today. And that is a Tuesday, not on a Monday.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you. Is it Thursday? I think the public hearing, well, I'm not going to, I don't want to say for sure. I think we have a special session on Thursday. There is some odd days of the weeks that are in there, so people will want to be mindful of that. Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
And Mr. Mayor, that's our final briefing item of the day. So thank you very much for your time and attention.
Well, thank you, Mr. Robinson. And with that, council will be in recess for a closed meeting, and we will adjourn back at 2 p.m. this afternoon. Thank you all.